So hello, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us. My name is Harrison Bench. I am the Deputy Executive Director of Students for Climate Action. Students for Climate Action is a nonprofit organization that connects high school students with their elected officials at all levels of government and from both political parties to advocate for common sense, climate, and renewable energy solutions. We've been around since 2017, and in that time, we've met with hundreds of elected officials, government officials, candidates for office, renewable energy, tech people, whoever we can to advocate for climate solutions at all levels of government. I started in 2017 as a high school sophomore with the group, and I'm now a second-year law student at Pace University. So it's been such a pleasure to work with this group, pushing for climate solutions. This is our third consecutive Climate Chats event with congressional candidates running on Long Island. This is actually our largest event so far in terms of candidates that we have included in the event, and I'm so happy to be here tonight with all of you. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Melissa for an introduction. And if Melissa's not quite
It looks like
yet,
Melissa froze.
absolutely, we can hand it over to Adrian Esposito first.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Adrian Esposito. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment. We are a statewide environmental and public health protection organization. And one of the primary things we've been working on is transitioning from dirty, dangerous fossil fuels to clean, safe, renewable energy resources. Many of you are from Long Island. That's where all our congressional candidates are from this evening. You know we're at ground zero here on Long Island for climate change impacts. And it's not something we're going to see in the future. It's something we're experiencing right now. You've seen all of the storms across America, sadly and tragically. Obviously, what's going on in Florida and also in Louisiana, of course, North Carolina. So this issue is something that we have to be concerned about. It's not the one that you usually hear them talking about in debates, although many presidential candidates, both presidential candidates, were asked a question about climate change in one of the debates. But even on the local level here for Congress, it hasn't gotten the attention it should. So we wanted to bring this program to you so that you can listen to the candidates themselves and understand their perspective and their agenda for climate change. I'm going to pass it to Dan.
Thanks, Adrian. My name is Dan Axatter. I'm the leader of the Long Island chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. We are a volunteer organization, and our main objective is to fight climate change. And the main thing that we do different than some other organizations is that we focus on a bipartisan, friendly building relationships with our members of Congress on the federal level. And we meet with Congress down in DC twice a year, and sometimes a lot more than that. So we've actually met with all the members here that are currently sitting. We've met with their offices multiple times. So it's that's what we do. And and I know Adrian Wood Duck is also a member. So I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. I'm Adrian Wood Duck. I reside in Southampton, Long Island, and I co-chair the Eastern Long Island chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. I've been the last 2 summers. I had the opportunity to go to Washington and meet with Congressman LaLota's staff and others. And it's a very exciting experience to be that closely engaged with my representatives. And I look forward to speaking with Congressman LaLota soon.
Fantastic. And Melissa.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you. You have
that
unfrozen.
was a beautiful. Sorry, I apologize for that. So hello, welcome. I'm very excited about this. opportunity. As Harrison said, it's our consecutive year of speaking with congressional candidates, and we're really excited. My name is Melissa Perrott. I am the Executive Director of Renewable Energy Long Island. We're an organization that works with Long Island and the state of New York in helping residents, municipalities, transitioning to that 100% renewable energy. We work with partners across the state on helping that transition. We are also a contractor with the Long Island Clean Energy Hub, and we work with a broader group of partners that connect residents with rebates, incentives, any assistance that we could provide in helping with not just that transition to clean energy to save our environment, to help climate change, but also save money. So I'm very excited to be part of this and part of this group. So welcome.
Thank you, Melissa. So with that being the introductions from tonight's panelists, before we have our first candidate join us at 7:15, I just wanted to give everybody an overview of the format of tonight. And so the 5 of us are here. We're representing 4 organizations. And so for each candidate interview, there are 4 questions that are asked. The same 4 questions are asked of each candidate, regardless of district, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of incumbency. We had some candidates who are not able to join us live tonight. So I understand that might be a disappointment. You're hoping to see your favorite congressman live tonight. We did pre-tape 4 interviews. So we have 2 who are joining live. We have 4 who are joining pre-taped. We do want to add that we were able to have participation from the 2 major party candidates running in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd districts. We provided both Laura Gillen and Anthony D'Esposito multiple opportunities to participate either live or virtually beforehand. And we were not able to hear back from them and get something scheduled in time. So the 2 candidates running in the 4th district won't be joining tonight, which is a little disappointing, as that's one of the most competitive districts in the country. And when we talk about the balance of the House of Representatives, it really does run through New York, and it could very well run through Long Island. And climate change is on everyone's minds, and that is why we're so happy to be here tonight. And I'm going to hand it over to Adrian Esposito to share a little more about climate change and Long Island.
The message that we want to bring to you this evening is that it's very critical to hold our congressional leaders accountable for climate change. It's still a discussion. I'm still, if any of you follow our social media or, follow a lot of the press and whatnot, people still actually don't believe in climate change as if it's a faith-based system, which it's not. It's a science-based system. You can't believe or not believe in gravity, right? You have to understand that it's real, and the same is true for climate change. We are still getting people telling us it's just the natural cycle of the earth, and we should not be concerned about it. We should not be putting resources into climate resiliency. We should not be worried about sea level rise, all of which is false. I'm sure you've heard of this new wonderful myth out there that giant storms are really geoengineered. They're geoengineered by our own government to create a Category 5 hurricane to hit America and I guess destroy certain states like Florida so that once again, our own government can pay for cleaning up the damage, which of course makes no sense. But this is what we're doing. We have a Congresswoman, Marjorie Greene Taylor, who went on an interview and told people that climate change is a hoax. Carbon dioxide is good for us, and we need more carbon dioxide because it's good for us. So, this is the kind of unfortunate scenarios we're facing, even here in 2024. And that's a challenge. We have to fight the myths. We have to follow the facts. We have to make sure that people understand these challenges and the solutions to these challenges are representing us in office and representing us when the decisions are made. So that's the compelling reason why we have climate chats and why we are really happy that you were able to join us tonight, because the more people on here, the more congressional representatives understand that this is key. It's important. We need to do something, and we want to thank you very much. Melissa, any final words before the first one is the second district challenger. So we have a couple more minutes. Melissa.
Yeah, sure. No, I will. I'm also I work with Students for Climate Action, and I have to really just say thank you. We have a lot of students on this call tonight, current and previous, and it's so important to have that youth voice. And Harrison, you really spoke about it when you were introducing yourself and the organization. So I just want to just really say thank you for joining us, everybody. We're really looking forward to this. And as Adrian said, this is about holding, our elected officials accountable, and we have some pretty good, important, I should say, decisions to make in the next coming week. So we hope this will help you with some informed information. And whatever we could do, all these organizations are here for a reason. We're here for you as resources. We're here to support you tonight and moving forward. So please reach out to us if you have any questions with climate change, renewable energy, or anything we can do to help you, even engaging with elected officials. That's what we do, and we enjoy it, and we really have good relationships with them, and that's the importance of our success. So I want to really just say thank you to everybody who's joined us tonight, and we're really looking forward to this. And I'm going to say, Harrison, you probably have some good words to say as well.
I was going to follow up on that. Please be sure to follow our groups on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, or X, whatever it is now. We have a bunch of different, all four orgs are doing a bunch of great work in a lot of different areas of environmental, climate, and energy issues. So to stay in touch with our group, find us online at our websites, find us online and follow us, like us, stay in touch with what we do, because we need your support. We need people who care about protecting the environment, combating climate change, promoting renewable energy, if we're going to be able to hold our elected officials truly accountable. So it takes a village, and we're all very happy to have you here.
Okay. So we have to ask Jordan, our master person running this program, if Mr. Lubin has joined yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
I will say one additional thing that really resonated with me at a recent conference is that, to fight climate change, you have to fight misinformation. And that is what we're here to do. Right? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of information that's being discussed, but what's facts, what's science? So that's really important right now to think about when you move forward with our elections. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. And I see that we have Mr. Rob Lubin here with us right now. Mr. Lubin, can you hear us correctly?
Yep. We're pausing for a technical moment. Okay, just
Sorry,
unmute
for some
yourself.
reason, my computer just it wanted to sing to me. There's nothing I can do about
Okay, well, we all should have that problem.
it. The Yankees are playing, and I had it on the background as I did a little prep. So
All good. We understand. Mr. Lubin, before we jump into, we have 4 questions that we're going to be asking you tonight, and we're going to keep it a little fast paced just because this is our live event. And so we're going to ask you to keep your responses to about 2 minutes, and we'll be sure to give you slight nudges if you do go a little over. But before we get into our first question, I just wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience, your background, what district you're running in, party affiliation, and any opening remarks that you have.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me. Good evening. My name is Rob Lubin. I'm the Democratic nominee for Congress, New York's 2nd District on Long Island. My district spans from Massapequa to Mastic Beach on the south shore of Long Island. We have got beautiful beaches, so it's a good thing we're having this chat. I'm a small business owner. I'm the youngest nominee in the state of New York. I'm 29 years old. My focus in my campaign is really, I call it the brass tacks campaign, because I'm going after affordability. I'm going after how expensive things are, and health coverage, and of course, clean drinking water, protecting our beaches, and small business protection as well. So, as a small business owner, really, I learned a lot about how difficult it is to pursue the American dream. And I was extremely passionate about being able to do this and start, my business. And I recognized that it's one of those things that governmental support is important. And I didn't get any. And I battled the healthcare system. I'm blind in my left eye, completely blind. Got no health coverage for my emergency surgery. I have a rare condition. Got no no coverage for the medication I have to take. And so I thought, hey, that's ridiculous. I mean, no one should have to choose, food on their table and health coverage. That happens all the time in this district. And then got engaged and recognized that, we wanted to buy a home, my fiance and I, and the home prices are insanely high on Long Island. In my district, it's almost $1 million. So all that pushed alongside the fact that, our drinking water is being contaminated every single day. I decided to run for Congress, and it's been one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And it's been a real honor being able to fight for my neighbors.
Wonderful. That's a really compelling story, and we're happy to have you here. I'm going to hand it over to Dan for our first question. Dan, you're
on mute.
All right. Mr. Lubin, thanks for joining us tonight. And I'm also, my name is Dan Axtatter. I'm also a small business owner, and I'm a volunteer for the Long Island chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. So I'll jump right into the question here. So what do you see as the most important climate or energy issue for the 2nd District? What actions to address climate change will be a top priority if you are elected to Congress?
Look, I think we can all agree Long Island, being an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, is susceptible to a lot of different aspects of climate change. I mean, beach erosion and the rising sea levels. Our scientists and fire departments have been flagging this as an issue for a long time. And if we don't do something about it fast, it's not like it's just going to go away. I also think it's important that we increase transit service on Long Island. Gives us an opportunity to cut down carbon emissions, which I think is super important, because the reality is we have to be shifting towards a more eco-friendly mindset. And I know we're getting there, okay? And I recognize a lot of people are pro doing that, but it needs to be done quickly. It's got to be done. And I think federal funds for clean energy. I think the time has come where we invest in things like offshore wind and solar and nuclear. So it gives us all an opportunity to actually have renewable energy at the forefront.
Thank you so much. I'm Adrian Esposito. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment. I also live in the 2nd Congressional District, by the way.
There we go.
There you go. So speaking of offshore wind, the South Fork Wind Farm came online this December. And actually, just last week, Harrison and Melissa and I were fortunate enough to go on a trip to go see them out in the ocean. And it was pretty magnificent, I have to say. So they are America's first offshore wind farm in federal waters. We have 2 others in development off of the shores of New York, which will be connecting to New York. So if you are elected, what will you do to help New York transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy and to ensure there's a well-trained workforce for this new industry and the new industry needs?
I mean, offshore wind, music to my ears. And I think it's very, very important that we continue to invest in it. I mean, it would be incredible for New York to be a hub of offshore wind. And it is a possibility. And as you've pointed out, it's happening, right? I mean, we are investing in it. We need to continue to invest in it, especially on the federal level. And I can't imagine, a Trump administration making those kinds of investments in our energy and renewable energy. I intend to be very, very much an advocate towards it. And I think when it comes to how we prepare for it, investing in trade schools, right? We want to prepare the workforce of tomorrow, folks that can go directly into working in the energy sector, which is a sector that is very, very much on the rise. And I also think working directly with the energy companies to identify their manpower needs allows us to have an understanding of how we can get people working in the sector itself and continuing the process of investing in our renewable energy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Lubin. My name is Harrison Bench. I'm Deputy Executive Director of Students for Climate Action. I realized I didn't introduce myself to you before.
All good.
As I'm sure you're aware, last month, Hurricane Helene brought widespread devastation and flooding to the American Southeast. Actually, a month before that, we had a tremendous storm dumping nearly 10 inches of rain in one night on Long Island, causing flooding, mudslides, damage to Blydeburg Park, damage to Mill Pond and Stony Brook. So we're seeing the impacts of stronger storms. And so we would like to know what you would do to ensure that Long Island has infrastructure resilient enough to withstand climate impacts as climate change worsens?
I mean, I tell voters this all the time. We're not going to wake up one morning, snap our finger, and this is going to stop. I saw the damage. I went out. I know it's not my district, but it's still my home. And I went out to go see the damage. It was horrific. And that's one day. And that is going to continue to happen. So the importance of investing and improving our drainage and sewage infrastructure needs to be top of mind. And that we can do through federal funds. I mean, we can fight for that kind of funding. And it needs to be done quickly. And of course, shoreline restoration. I mean, I keep harping on that, but I think it's so important that we continue to find different ways to invest and save our shoreline. Something that I think is interesting as well that's been noted by scientists that I've spoken to is wetland rewilding. You know, creating that defensive moat gives us obviously a little bit more space between what could potentially happen. The only way this happens, though, is if people believe that climate change needs to be addressed. And it's something that I talk about often. Not everyone believes in it. I know that's crazy, and I know that I'm saying that, and you know, folks, sometimes they laugh when I say it, but the reality is it's true. Not everyone believes in it. It scares the crap out of me. And I think a congressional committee to really study and, you know, the advanced flood protection system, because we have so much flooding on Long Island, it can make a huge difference. And we've seen that being done, you know, successfully in countries like the Netherlands.
Thank you. And hello, my name is Melissa Perrott. I'm the Executive Director of Renewable Energy Long Island. And climate change isn't a political issue, right? It doesn't care who you vote for, and it certainly doesn't care who's in the White House. The two presidential candidates have very divergent opinions on climate and renewable energy. No matter who wins in November, how would you work with the new administration to advance climate policy?
I mean, you're absolutely right. Mother Nature doesn't wake up and pick Democratic states and Republican states when she decides to do what she does. And I think it's important that, you know, bipartisanship be on the forefront. I mean, that's one of the reasons I decided to run. You know, D or R doesn't affect me. What affects me is making sure we're getting things done, and the second district has the best possible representative fighting for change. I think Republican states get hit equally as hard, right? I mean, we see what happens in the Gulf. It's terrifying. The only way we're going to make progress, though, is through legitimate bipartisanship, working together to strengthen our shorelines across the country and exploring new ways to prevent flooding, supporting trade schools to get people into the sector to make sure that we have the right folks and the right amount of manpower to continue our progress that we are making. I don't care, you know, what the people's opinion, you know, what ends up happening in terms of who I have to work with. I mean, of course, I have my choice of who I would like to work with, but the point is, Rob Lubin doesn't care. I will work with anybody because I believe in the power of working together and getting things done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Lubin. Before we let you go, we do have 2 minutes here at the end. If there are anything else you want to just bring up, anything you didn't get to say, anything you want to mention before we say goodbye to you tonight.
Well, obviously, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure answering your questions and having this conversation. You know, Long Island, specifically my home, is a place that gets affected a lot by what we're discussing this evening. And I think it's so important that a representative be out there on the forefront championing climate protection and protecting our environment. Because I'd like to also add, our drinking water is being, you know, damaged. We have so much to do, and we don't have that much time. I guarantee when I win my election, my focuses on climate change will be top of mind because we've got an island to protect and a country to protect, or else none of the other issues actually really matter. If we're not taking care of our home, the other stuff is irrelevant. So thank you so much for having me. A real honor and a pleasure. Please continue your hard work because it is appreciated.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lubin. You have a great night.
Likewise. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome.
So everyone, that was Mr. Lubin. He's running for the 2nd congressional seat. I see we're being joined by Congressman LaLota, getting the, whoops, and they're off, but I think they're coming back. They were trying to get their camera
And we're
focused there.
And we're a little before schedule, so everything's good.
Yes.
we'll just give them another minute or two to join.
Okay, so I just want to address one of the comments in the chat. Somebody said, can you ask them about nuclear? And I just want to say that we agreed that we would ask them all the same 4 questions. So I understand that nuclear now is being talked up a great deal. I'll say for the record, my organization is anti-nuclear. That's not going to change as long as I'm the executive director. And but we just can't ask the candidates that question, although I understand and hear you in your concern. All right, we're going to wait 1 more minute, or 2 more minutes, I actually should say, for Congressman LaLota to join us. We know that they are logging on.
Yes, and before he joins, I do just want to say we really do appreciate Mr. Lubin and Mr. LaLota being able to join us live. It's really fantastic that we're able to have this discussion with them in real time in front of all of you, and we hope that we thank them for joining us. We know it must be crazy, the schedule of congressional candidates, especially this last few weeks before Election Day. I know early voting starts actually next Saturday, I believe. So it's
Yep.
crunch time.
Well, while we're waiting, I'll just make a plug for Proposition 2 on the ballot in Suffolk County. So, you know, turn your ballot over. There'll be Proposition 2, which is the clean water ballot referendum. Okay, Congressman is going to fix his, we can only see you sideways, Congressman.
All right, give us a minute. We're in a Starbucks now. We have to readjust it. So
You're
give
in a
us.
Starbucks.
Yeah, it's crazy tonight. Sorry about that, guys. Give
Okay.
me 1 minute. We're gonna try to fix it. So
Okay.
just stand by.
No worries. Thanks for joining us.
And I'll add, I think these climate chats are so important because when it comes to issues that are important to you, you don't always have that opportunity to ask your elected officials or your the candidates about that matters to you. So the fact that we developed four questions that we vetted so we could ask them specifically how they handle renewable energy, climate change if they are elected. And that's so important. So I'm very excited for us that we're here today to do that.
Much better, Congressman. That's perfect. And hopefully no one will spill coffee on you in the Starbucks and we'll be good to go. Okay.
You're
Harrison?
muted, Congressman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're muted. You have to
You're muted,
unmute yourself.
Congressman.
Sorry, first time Zoomer here, guys. My bad.
No, we appreciate it. We appreciate you joining us. Like we were just saying, crazy schedule, I'm sure, for congressional candidates right now. So we appreciate you taking your time. We're going to get right to it. Before we jump into our questions, Congressman, we wanted to give you 2 minutes here at the start to introduce yourself, the district you're running in. You're running for re-election. Just introduce yourself to our viewers here.
Awesome, appreciate that. I'm Congressman Nick LaLota, the first-term congressman here on the east end of Long Island. Longtime Navy man, went to the Naval Academy. I spent 11 years in the Navy, deployed 3 times overseas, visited 20 different countries. My dad was a cop. Both my grandfathers are cops. My brother spent 20 years in the Marine Corps. Both basically every man in my family has served in uniform one way or the other. We love this country. We'll do anything for it. In Congress, I'm on the Armed Services, Homeland Security, and Small Business Committees. But like many of my predecessors before me, both Republican and Democrat, very concerned about our environment, want to be very common sense when we pass legislation, budgets, policies, everything in between, want to make sure that we preserve the environment for generations to come. This is not my term, but I've adopted this from several of my predecessors in different positions. We know that the environment is something that we're borrowing from our children, not something we've inherited from our parents. And when more of us have that perspective, we can adopt policies and budgets and whatnot responsibly for the betterment of our future. It's so important, and I'm looking forward to a great dialogue with you guys tonight.
Fantastic, Congressman. I'm going to hand it over to Adrian Woodduck for our first question.
Great.
Hi, good evening, Congressman LaLota. I was in your office the last 2 summers with the Citizens Climate Lobby, and I would enjoy seeing you again live, somewhat live. So my question is, what do you see as the most important climate or energy issue in the 1st congressional district, and what actions do you plan to address the climate change? What will be a top priority if you're reelected?
If I may take a liberty and offer you a kind of a 1A and a 1B to your what is most important thing, because I think that they're interrelated. I think it's important for Congress to continue to find ways to have America become energy independent, to not only explore safely the natural resources that we have here in this great blessed country of ours, but also to simultaneously endeavor to have battery and wind and solar and other things that help us become more energy independent. It's good for national security. It's good for the economy. It's good for the environment. There's a lot of wins that could happen when we endeavor to make ourselves more energy independent. That's important. And in parallel, specifically here on Long Island, it's our infrastructure that if we invest in will help us be more resilient from the storms that have been hitting us, not just once in 100 years, not just once in 10 years, but once every 2 or 3 years. We're getting significant storms here on Long Island. If we invest more in infrastructure, we can help that out. I have been able to secure $150 million for Long Island, and we've been able to dedicate millions of dollars to things like water quality and infrastructure to ensure that Long Island has the resources it needs to protect itself from environmental issues. And hopefully we can get into some other things like Plum Island, which a few of us have worked on together as well, but maybe that'll come up in a future question.
Well, this is climate chat, so I'm just going to tell you probably won't come up. So the next question, Congressman, is the South Fork Wind Farm, we're very excited to say, is online. It's running. Yep. It's actually exceeding the original projection of energy generation. So it is right now, as we speak, supplying clean energy to 70,000 homes in your congressional district. Actually, Harrison and Melissa and I had an opportunity to go out and see it in person last week, and it was pretty magnificent. So the question is, there was also 2 others in development for New York State off of Long Island shores. So if you're reelected, what will you do to help New York transition to renewable energy? Are you supporting these offshore wind projects? And what do you think you can do to help build a well-trained workforce to meet the new industry's needs?
Yeah, there are a lot of good wins, W-I-N-S, that come from wins, W-I-N-D, and our endeavors here on Long Island. I'm a co-chair of the Offshore Wind Caucus in Congress. I support responsible construction of wind farms to ensure that not only from a national security perspective and economic perspective, but also from an environmental perspective, that we enhance our great country of ours. We need to continue to endeavor to do so. We have received, as you know, Adrian, a lot of feedback from some local communities love the wind farms, some not so much. I have been a part of ensuring that residents have buy-in to these issues, because I think it's important that as a former local official, and I was involved in county government for 8 years and village government for 6, we need to move forward in this smartly. We need to have buy-in all over. We also need to educate as well to ensure that folks understand this is part of our future. There's a dichotomy. We are blessed with decades worth of oil and natural gas in our country, but there's only decades. We're going to need to find other resources ultimately to help sustain ourselves here. And we should get started on that now. Wind should absolutely be a large part of that portfolio.
Awesome. Thank you, Congressman, for joining us. As I'm sure you're aware, last month, Hurricane Helene brought widespread destruction and flooding to the American Southeast. And actually the month before that, in your district on Long Island, we had one storm dump nearly 10 inches in one night, causing destruction along the North Shore, flooding, mudslides, devastation at Mill Pond and Stony Brook and Blydenburg Park. As climate change leads to stronger storms, we want to know what you're going to do to make sure that Long Island's infrastructure is resilient enough to withstand some of these impacts.
Yeah, I wasn't in Congress at the time when the House considered the infrastructure bill, though I would have supported. I've been on record for quite some time that I would have been a Republican supporting an infrastructure bill, because we have to invest in our future. Specifically, as a New Yorker and a Long Islander, we don't get our fair share here. We send way more to both Albany and Washington than we get back. One of the ways that we can help make my constituents whole on that disparity is through investments in infrastructure. And this helps with the environment too. We know the environment is hurting some places, and I've been to that site on Mill Pond numerous times. I was with the mayor just a couple of days ago, and he's frustrated, rightfully so, that government hasn't acted quickly enough. And we're trying to work through with FEMA, Senator Schumer's office, President Biden's office, to ensure that right now we get the response. But we can't always just be responding. We need to aggressively invest proactively. And those investments, when they're made proactively, are actually less expensive than the responses that we have that we've seen recently. So it's a whole of government approach. Some town officials are involved, county officials, state feds. We all need to do our part. But the bottom line is we need to have a large appreciation for infrastructure investments that are resilient, that can weather these storms, pun intended.
Wonderful. Thank you, Congressman. My name is Melissa Peratt, Executive Director of Renewable Energy Long Island. Nice to meet you. As you may know, climate change is not a political issue. It doesn't care who you vote for, and it certainly doesn't care who's in the White House. So we have two presidential candidates that have very divergent opinions on climate and renewable energy. So no matter who wins in November, how would you work with the new administration to advance climate policies?
Yeah, I would suggest that voters who want to have an understanding of this should understand people's records. I'm voted rated more bipartisan than 85% of my colleagues, and I passed more bills than 95% of my colleagues. I go to Washington to do good work and to reach across the aisle, especially when necessary. And on climate issues, that's especially no different. I'm one of just 17, maybe it was 17 or 18 of us House Republicans who recently signed a letter that said there are things in the Inflation Reduction Act with respect to environmental tax credits and energy tax credits that are good, and that regardless of who has control of what moving forward, let's not throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. If my party takes control of everything, let's make sure that we're precise in things. There are some great energy tax credits within there. So let's make sure that as we move forward, regardless of, like you said, who has control of what, that we respect things that are good for the long-term stability and investment of our nation, especially with respect to the environment. There is a chance for good people to be reasonable and to reach across the aisle and to be common sense and to be smart about how we move forward on things like the IRA.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us. Before we do say goodbye, we just wanted to give you a chance here at the end if you had any closing remarks, anything you want to expand upon or didn't get a chance to talk about.
Yeah, I think that we live in the greatest nation the world has ever known. A lot of attention, rightfully so, gets paid to things about the border, things about our economy and inflation, things about our standing overseas. Not enough attention gets paid towards the climate. But trust me, just like Ken LaValle and Ed Romaine and others before me, I have a big eye on our environment, on our climate, and we'll continue to hold my office responsibly with that future in mind.
So we do have another minute, so I'm going to take the liberty here of asking one more question, if you don't mind. I did not know that you were co-chair of the Offshore Wind Congressional Caucus in the House. Can you just tell us what the role of that caucus is, or what do you view the mission, and what would you like to achieve through that caucus?
Yeah, education and awareness on things. I think that some of my colleagues from parts of the country who haven't dipped their toe in the water with offshore wind just yet are not yet educated. So it's a bipartisan committee, and we're working together to first and foremost educate more members of Congress from other parts of the nation who haven't embraced wind yet, to understand the positive impacts, the economic upside, both in terms of energy independence, but also jobs that it creates and everything in between. We're at the first stages. It's a new caucus, and we're at the first stages of mostly education right now that hopefully will turn into policy action moving forward.
Okay, interesting. Please keep our organizations in the loop if there's policy action moving forward. We would appreciate that.
Yeah, and we should definitely dialogue, especially if there are to be interruptions with previous policies that are passed. We should stay in touch with how to do that smartly.
Yes, Congressman, we will be staying in touch. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
No.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Congressman, for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Have a great night.
Thanks so much. Bye now.
Okay. Awesome. So that concludes our 2 live segments, but we have 4 more candidates to go. So we hope you'll all stick with us to hear what the rest of the group has to say. And our first taped interview that we're going to show now is from John Avalon. So Mr. Avalon is challenging Congressman LaLota in the 1st district. And so we'll play that now for you all.
Thanks, everybody, again for joining us at Climate Chats 2024. Now we have the segment where we're joined by John Avalon. John is running to be the congressperson for the 1st Congressional District, which is the East End of Long Island. John, please take a moment and make some opening remarks.
Thank you very much. And it's great to be with you all. I'm John Avalon, a Democratic nominee here in New York's 1st District, Eastern Long Island. I've been a journalist for most of the last 20 years, most recently as a CNN anchor and senior political analyst. Before that, I was editor-in-chief of the Daily Beast. I've written several books. And I've worked for Democrats and Republicans, but the focus of our campaign for me is to rebuild the middle of our politics and rebuild the middle of our economy, and to focus on the fact that I deeply believe there's more that unites us than divides us. And we need to turn the page on this toxic tribalized time and begin solving problems to make sure that America's working for working families again, and making sure that building on that fundamental understanding I think most of us have, which was that America works best when we work together. And that's how we tackle the big problems, including climate change.
Our first question is going to come from Dan.
Hi, John. Thanks for being with us here today. The first question is, what do you see as the most important climate or energy issue for the 1st Congressional District? What actions to address climate change would be a top priority if you are elected to Congress?
Well, I see these two issues as directly connected. You know, Tim Bishop was very fond of saying that in Suffolk County, the economy is the environment and the environment is the economy. It's farming and fishing and travel and tourism. And so because we've got 1,000 miles of coastline here on Long Island, you know, climate change is impacting all of us. Denialism is not credible anymore. We're all dealing with coastal erosion and flooding. And so this is a proper role of government. The way I think about this is there's climate change mitigation, and then there's climate change innovation. On the mitigation front, we need to make sure we're following through on the investments we made in the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill to make sure that we're making sure these communities aren't flooding on a regular basis. I think we can add to that by adding things like making it tax deductible for primary homes, family homes, small businesses, to make it tax deductible to make your property more resilient, because that benefits everybody. We need to make sure we're investing in the BRIC program because it's easier, it's less expensive, frankly, to mitigate climate change on the front end than it is to deal with disasters on the back end. And unfortunately, a lot of our Republican colleagues want to claw back a lot of the funding that's been put in place, billions of dollars to combat climate change and coastal erosion. So we need to make sure that is secured and then built upon. And I think we can depolarize the issue if we work together and we aren't simply sort of greenwashing the rhetoric and then undercutting the actual efforts and investments. The second side is climate change innovation, and that's the energy future. I think, if you look at the extraordinary research that's being done at Brookhaven National Labs and Stony Brook in particular, with the creation of Discovery Park outside Brookhaven National Labs, which is designed to incubate next generation clean energy technology businesses, we can become a leader right here in Suffolk County, right here on Long Island, in the next generation of clean energy technologies that will help us innovate our way out of this problem. It requires public-private partnership, it requires investment, but that can be the next great sort of economic boom for our region, and it can offer us being a concrete part of the solution. So that's the win-win in terms of the economy and the environment, both climate change innovation and climate change mitigation. And we can be a leader right here in Suffolk County if we work together.
Okay. John, some of us, Melissa and Harrison and I, were fortunate enough to go out on a trip to go see the America's first offshore wind farm in federal waters, right off of the South Fork of Long Island, 35 miles offshore. It's actually operating better than anticipated and supplying clean, safe, renewable energy for 70,000 homes here right on Long Island. 2 other developments are right now going along the regulatory process. And we want to know from you, what will you do to help promote offshore wind and the transition to renewable energy, and ensure that there's a well-trained workforce to meet this new industry's needs?
Absolutely. And look, I love seeing New York being a leader again. And the fact that we are leading on this renewable front is incredibly exciting. And I think a lot of the controversies that were used to try to sort of stall the program have evaporated in the face of the fact of its reality. And obviously, more will come online, more families and houses will benefit, and ultimately it will lower cost and give us dependable renewable energy. So this is just the beginning, as long as it's done in community consultation. And that's a key criteria for why it's worked where it is and why we've had some holdups around Long Beach. But we need to make sure that we're breaking down these barriers and leaning into the future. We need to be leaders again. And that's sort of all the above, but particularly when it comes to wind power. Now, you asked the crucial question, which is how can we make sure that we're taking economic advantage of this emerging industry? And I attended over at Stony Brook a fascinating sort of day-long effort to make sure we got young workers working with labor unions like the Long Island Fed. And I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Long Island Fed and AFL-CIO, as well as, by the way, the League of Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club and leading environmental organizations. But when we're working with these organizations to make sure they're apprentice programs, so that students who want to get in this emerging industry can get involved early on and not just get a job, but a rewarding career in renewable technologies. That's the way that these unions can partner with our educational establishments and make sure that there are apprentice programs being put in place, because these are great jobs that are coming online. And we need to make sure we're working with the communities to make sure that they're locally resourced and that young folks who want to enter in this field have an ease of entry, because it'll benefit everybody. And this is the essence of win-win, not win-win, but win-win.
It's both, I was going to say. Harrison.
Awesome. Mr. Avalon, thank you so much.
Call me
As
Jim.
you know, last month, Hurricane Helene brought widespread flooding and devastation to the southeast. And actually, a month before that, we had a storm on Long Island that in one night dumped nearly 10 inches of rain and brought a lot of destruction to the first district. It destroyed Vladimir Park and brought damage to Mill Pond and Stony Brook. As climate change leads to stronger storms, we would like to know what you will do to ensure Long Island has infrastructure resilient enough to withstand these impacts.
Those storms are devastating. What we saw from Helene in North Carolina, I mean, it's heartbreaking, it's devastating, and it shows how dangerous the policy of climate change denialism has been. When I was a journalist, I did a whole series on called A Brief History of Climate Change Denial, where we looked at sort of the way that our progress was stalled. And unfortunately, it really did cost us, and it is costing us. And the fact that some of these states that are suffering the worst have elected representatives who are climate change denialists boggles the mind, but it does not serve the citizenry. Now, as it applies to the storm damage we saw on the North Shore, I mean, I went up to Port Jeff the day after the storms. When you saw the devastation at the Mill Pond, I mean, that was not a named storm, but it completely overwhelmed, blew out the dam on the waterway and devastated the pond, and we need to rebuild. But I also saw massive rock and mudslides affecting condos and HOAs that are currently not protected by FEMA. And that's an example of one thing we can do, which is the Disaster Assistance Fairness Act, which Steve Israel championed when he was in Congress, that my opponent has not signed on to, but would make sure that there are FEMA funds available for condos and HOAs, which are currently excluded. A lot of these storms don't rise, they have great damage, and they deepen the challenges these communities are facing. I was talking again in Port Jeff to the local firehouse, and they were saying they're flooding 3 times a year. And that's just not sustainable unless we make these investments. That's why the monies that, for example, that were put in place by the Inflation Reduction Act to combat coastal erosion and the impacts of climate change are so essential, and why it's mind-boggling but true that my opponent wants to pull that back. Which is just totally counterproductive to me. The other thing I've proposed in an extensive op-ed is to invest in the BRICS program, $1 billion a year, because it is to do the repairs after a natural disaster hits is 6 times more expensive than investing on the front. So we need to get back in the prevention business, the resilience business. That benefits everybody, and that's a smart use of government funds and incentives, working with individuals and homes and private industry. This is a win-win, but we need to take a leadership role. We need to get ahead of it, not react to it. That's the worst of all worlds, because it's the most expensive way to handle this. So these are just a few of the things I think we can and should do. And I was very struck by the fact that even days later there were cars submerged. We suspended our canvassing on the campaign for 2 days just to do wellness checks. on folks who were impacted. And I called them up afterwards, and they were stunned because they said, wow, I mean, we haven't heard from our congressman, but here's the candidate reaching out. And this is just a massive cost that's being imposed upon working families and middle-class families over and above the affordability crisis they're dealing with. So it's the right thing to do. We need to get ahead of it. And those are 3 ideas of how we could do it. BRICS, the Disaster Assistance Fairness Act, investing in BRIC ahead of time, and then also making it deductible to make your own property more resilient to it.
Thank you. So as we know, climate change isn't a political issue, right? It's more of a human issue. It doesn't care who you vote for, and it certainly doesn't care for who's in the White House. So the 2 presidential candidates have very divergent opinions on climate and renewable energy. So no matter who wins in November, how would you work with the new administration to advance climate policy?
Well, I would respectfully suggest it's much more than divergent opinions. One is a outright re-embrace of climate change denialism that promises to literally do nothing. In Donald Trump telling oil and gas executives they can save millions of dollars on lobbying if they just give him his campaign dollars right now. I mean, those aren't different approaches. I mean, not that long ago, I think back to Bush 41's, Secretary of the Environment, I believe, O'Reilly, who actually showed there was broad bipartisan support at one point. We've regressed. There used to be different philosophical approaches that dealt proactively with the same problem, and we've regressed from that. And there too, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are fundamental differences in terms of the parties, putting aside sort of the greenwashing and the rhetoric that occurs. One party keeps wanting to take away funding that's already been hard won to help combat climate change. So unfortunately, I'd respectfully suggest you're right that climate change doesn't give a damn, coastal erosion doesn't give a damn what political party you belong to, but unfortunately it is political because one party seems more willing to deal with it and the other party has regressed from a time when it did want to acknowledge climate change and propose new solutions to being in a position of denialism, which will only compound our problems going down. So I think our opportunity is to A, win, B, depolarize the issue because it does affect everybody, but the stakes are incredibly high. I don't need to tell you that. I think whatever party wins, if I'm elected and Democrats take the House, I think we have an obligation, and I believe deeply the responsibility is to work with anybody who wants to work in good faith to solve this problem. I'm concerned about the good faith because we've already seen in the first Trump term an embrace of sort of anti-science climate denialism with appointees in key positions. Whatever gains we can make, whatever we can do to make sure those dollars we've already allocated aren't rolled back, that's our core responsibility. But this is not, unfortunately, and I don't dislike Republicans, I'm married to a Republican, but unfortunately, we are not dealing with a situation where we're dealing with different philosophical approaches to solving the same problem. Right now, we're dealing with denialism and withdrawal of funds and a desire to lean into the problem. And I think we can lean into the problem intelligently in a way that depolarizes it, that creates a win-win for businesses, for the environment and the economy. But we should not buy into this idea that there are simply divergent opinions. They are starkly different. One would push us further back on the timeline and increase the sum total and cost of suffering that comes from ignoring climate change. And the other outcome would have us take a leadership role in leaning into it and solving the problem together. And that's what I'm committed to do.
Thank you so much. We have 2 minutes left, or actually 60 seconds. We want to give you a chance to just make some closing remarks. And just, with the thought in mind that if ever there was a ground zero for Long Island, it's really the first congressional district, right? From Montauk to Mastic Beach. Sea level rise and flooding has really felt its hold there and taken and really given those areas an impact, and they need a strategy. So as your last remaining thought on climate change, what would you like to say?
I would just like to say that we don't have time to lose. You're right in saying that we are all feeling the impact of climate change here on Long Island, particularly in the first district, on a regular basis. And it doesn't give a damn what political party you belong to. So that should galvanize us to deal with the problem together. But we should know that there is a fundamental difference, unfortunately, between the two parties and the two candidates running to be your congressional representative in terms of how much of a priority it is to deal with this problem with the kind of urgency that's required to get ahead of it. We're already on the back foot because of decades of climate change denialism. Now we have the opportunity to depolarize this issue and deal with it together. We need to think about it in terms of climate change mitigation, making those investments ahead of time because it's cheaper than doing it on the back end after the disaster is already compounded, but we don't have any time to waste. And then we do need to think about the larger opportunities to innovate our way out of this problem, which we have all the tools to do right here. So I believe we can depolarize this issue, take a leadership role here on Long Island, building on the progress we've made with wind energy. And that's the role we need to play. And a member of Congress who's dealing directly with the issue, and I would be if I have the honor of serving, I want to serve on the Infrastructure and Transportation Committee, particularly Water Resources and the Environment Subcommittee. That subcommittee does more to combat climate change and deal with what issues of water quality that affect all of us. And obviously vote for Prop 2, which would help us make strides to improve water quality here on Long Island. But understand the stakes of this race. Don't get lulled into thinking this is just another race and you're going to make progress no matter what happens. That's unfortunately not the case. So let's turn the page on this chapter we've been in and start making progress together, because it does affect all of us. And so we need to find common ground and using common facts to find common solutions. And that's what I'm committed to doing as your member of Congress.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time tonight, John Avalon, and we will see you at election time. Okay, everyone. So that was John Avalon, a candidate for the 1st Congressional District. And we're happy to tell you that we're moving on now to Congressman Suozzi, who is the incumbent in the 3rd Congressional District. Let's see what Tom Suozzi has to say about climate change. So much for joining us. For our viewers, Congressman Suozzi is from the 3rd Congressional District, and he's running for re-election this November. And we're here at Climate Chats, and we're going to be talking to the Congressman about the issue, of course, of climate change. And we're going to give you 2 minutes, Congressman, to have some opening remarks for our viewers.
Well, let me just say hello and thank you to everybody. Really appreciate this opportunity from all the different groups that are sponsoring this. And I'm excited to talk to Climate Chats. The environment and climate change are really big issues in my life and in my career. And I'm not going to go through a whole big speech other than to say that at one time I was named the Environmentalist of the Year for all of New York State. And I've won awards from some of your groups, and I've been endorsed by all the major environmental groups because my whole career, from when I was Mayor of Glen Cove to County Executive of Nassau County or now in Congress, I've tried to use the limited influence I've had to try and get people to focus on the importance of preserving and protecting our environment and fighting against climate change, which is an existential threat to all of us in the world, but certainly here on Long Island and in New York. So please let me answer any questions you have, and I'll be happy to try and give you as much detail as possible.
Great. Well, it just so happens we do have some questions, Congressman.
Oh, what a surprise.
I know you're shocked. Dan, you get the first question.
Yeah, again, thank you for meeting with this Congressman. And the first question we have is, what do you see as the most important climate or energy issue for the 3rd Congressional District? And what actions to address climate change will be a top priority if you are reelected to Congress?
I mean, I think that our district here on Long Island is affected like the whole country is affected. We see all these storms every week. I always go back to, I think it was a year and a half ago or so when we had the smoke coming down from Canada. And I remember thinking to myself, we got to close our windows. And, what if this goes on for months? What would we do? We're helpless. It's so beyond our control. And a lot of these climate related events are beyond our control. And of course, we're much more prone here because we're on the water on the North Shore of Long Island, the Long Island Sound, and we're going to see flooding because of that. But we have the same problem with, rain, wind, and weather. I mean, so it's just devastating, as well as heat and drought. I mean, it's just, I was reading something the other day that showed the number of major severe storms that have transpired over the past year compared to 10 years ago. And it's the numbers, tenfold of what it was. So there's all different impacts we're seeing in different places. Some places have drought, some places have floods, some places have storms, some places have forest fires. These are all different impacts related to climate change. For us here in my district, I think severe storms is the thing we have to be most concerned about. And building resiliency is going to be an important part, as well as trying to just change everybody's behavior.
Agreed.
Oh, and my biggest focus is, I played a big role in trying to passing the IRA, which had the largest climate investment in the history of the world, and bringing money from that IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the Infrastructure Act, is a big focus of mine. We have all this money that we've put in place, and now that I'm back in Congress, my focus is on trying to access that money so it actually comes back to my district, back to Long Island, back to Queens, back to New York. So that's my biggest focus, is not necessarily passing more laws as it is making sure that we get our fair share of that money to implement the changes that we envisioned as part of both the Infrastructure Act, bipartisan, and the Inflation Reduction Act, not bipartisan.
Thank you. Well, as you probably know, the South Fork offshore wind farm is the largest offshore wind farm in the history of America, at least in federal waters, or actually in any waters. And some of us, Harrison and Melissa and I, had an opportunity to go out and see it last week, 35 miles offshore. It's working better than expectations. It's now generating clean, safe, renewable power for 70,000 homes here on Long Island. We want to know, that what is your position that if reelected, what will you do to help New York transition to renewable energy and to ensure there is a well-trained workforce for this new industry need?
Well, so again, I'm 100% supportive of offshore wind, as well as any wind projects and solar projects and renewable energy projects, including nuclear, including hydrogen, including water. We have to create as much renewable energy as possible. And, I've always been involved in the issue. I held a conference a few years ago where I brought together the wind industry, along with labor, along with environmental groups, to figure out how to make connections amongst these different parties, because it's a win-win-win for everybody. It's a win for the environment, it's win for working people, and it's a win for industry that focuses on this green energy. So, Andrea Ocasio-Cortez and I don't agree on a lot of different things, but she and I both applied for a grant together that we got, which provided funding for SUNY Maritime, so that we could train young people at SUNY Maritime as to how they could work in the wind industry, because you need trained, skilled professionals that can go out in that 35 miles that you went the other day and work in that environment. And there's a lot of jobs to be created from that. So a big challenge for us a lot of times is when we want to change things, we can't leave behind the people that are benefiting from the status quo. So if you've got a bunch of people working at a plant and all of a sudden they're going to be out of work, what are we doing to actually replace those jobs for those people and people in related industries, that they're going to be able to get jobs that are good paying jobs with good benefits and good wages? So we have to do that. And we also have to be careful of the fact that we don't do this in a way that's going to cause everybody's utility bills to skyrocket out of control. That's why the Inflation Reduction Act was so important, because if New York State just does this stuff on its own without subsidies from the federal government, we're going to be paying an enormous price while other places are not doing what we're doing. So there's always got to be a sense of balance. I feel like, I'm sure the people on this call and people who are going to watch this video, there's a real sense of urgency that we have to feel regarding climate. But there are other folks that are not as jazzed up as we are, and they're concerned about the effect on utility prices. So we have to figure out how can we move forward in a way that both accomplishes our goals as far as the environment, while also accomplishing our goals as far as the economy, and while also accomplishing our goals as far as working people.
Okay, great. Next question, Harrison.
Thank you, Congressman. As I'm sure you know, last month, Hurricane Helene brought widespread flooding and devastation.
My wife's name is Helene. She loved all those headlines.
I don't know if she liked those headlines.
Helene packs a punch.
Absolutely. And it certainly did to a lot of communities in Appalachia. And even the month before that, we saw, and you kind of touched upon this before, severe storms here on Long Island. We had one night almost 10 inches of rain dumped, especially along the North Shore, where we saw mudslides, flash flooding, destruction of roads and other infrastructure. So we were just interested, if you are reelected to Congress and you touched upon the infrastructure bill, what more can be done to make sure that we do have infrastructure and buildings resilient enough to withstand the impacts of climate change here on Long Island?
Well, first of all, yeah, I regret now even joking about the hurricane because it had such a tremendously negative impact on so many people. And storms do have such a negative impact. I was visiting a family the other day that had one of those mudslides from Sands Point down into Manor Haven, and their whole backyard is deluged with mud, and so much stuff is covered up because of it. You know, we're not going to be able to do this overnight. We're going to have to think long term about resiliency projects. You know, I've brought funding in throughout my career, but even while in Congress, to deal with stormwater projects, also to deal with replanting of wetlands. We need to do more stuff like that. We have to think of both the natural impacts, natural barriers, as well as physical structures as well. When I was in Congress previously, I got grants for Asheroken, for a wiped out causeway, and for Northport, for flooding that came down Main Street and caused a deluge along the streets. But it takes years to implement these things. It takes years to get the money. It takes years to do the design. It takes years to implement them. And, you know, we're running out of time because it's getting worse and worse. I mean, I've been in politics for 30 years. And, you know, I was talking about this in 1993. And, you know, Al Gore was talking about it in 1988. So this is, you know, we've taken a long time, and we've made, you know, we have to emphasize in this election that the Inflation Reduction Act is the largest investment in the history of the world to address climate change. I mean, that's so important for us to remember. And, you know, people are not talking about it enough, quite frankly. And, you know, Donald Trump is talking about undoing it. And, you know, let's wake up at how urgent this one issue is for all of America. Again, I'm going to work to try and bring money back to my district from the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure law, to help to do more related to water and stormwater and resiliency projects, along with a whole bunch of other stuff related to sewer and water as well.
Thank you so much.
Our last question comes from Melissa.
Thank you. Climate change isn't a political issue. It doesn't care who you vote for, and it certainly doesn't care who's in the White House. So the two presidential candidates have very divergent opinions on climate and renewable energy. So no matter who wins in November, how would you work with the new administration to advance climate policy?
Well, you know, people that know me, they know that my whole career is based upon figuring out how can we build a coalition of people on both sides of the aisle to get things done. That's what I'm about. When Newsday endorsed me, the headline was Suozzi stresses bipartisanship. Now, I'm hoping Kamala Harris becomes the president of the United States of America, but if she doesn't, I'm going to do everything I can to get Republicans to work together to try and address climate change as well, and not to undo a lot of these things that we've done that are so important for our future. That's not going to be easy, but that's something I'm committed to. And, you know, we have to accept the fact that not everybody's going to agree with what we think, but we still have to get stuff done, and we still have to literally save the world. So that's my focus, and that's what will continue to be my focus. And the bottom line is that sometimes you can't do these things in a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. And I've always told the story about when I took my kids down to the Wellwind Nature Preserve when they were little, 15 years ago, and we saw a red-tailed hawk fly through the canopy of the trees. And then we went down to the waterfront, and we saw an osprey dive in and capture a fish. We're like, wow, that's so awesome. And I remember thinking to myself, did I see those birds when I was a little kid? Because I used to walk in the Wellwind Nature Preserve when I was a kid, but I don't remember seeing those birds. Was that because I was a kid and I didn't pay attention? Or was that because those birds weren't there? So I called up the Audubon Society and I said, hey, in the 1960s and 70s, were there red-tailed hawk and osprey around here? They said, no, they'd all been killed off by DDT. And it wasn't until Rachel Carson wrote the book, Silent Springs, that we banned DDT. Those birds didn't come back in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. But after 15 years, 20 years, you started to see the reemergence of these birds. So the work that we do today, you know, we're not going to see results right away. but we've got to keep on doing the work. We have to keep on plugging away. And I promise that if we all keep on working and do the right thing and keep on doing the effort that's necessary, we will make things better and we will address this problem. But we've got a lot more work to do, both here in New York, in the United States, and then throughout the world. And I'm committed to doing that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time, Congressman. We have 60 seconds left. I just want to see if you'd like to make any closing statement or something else you'd like to add.
Well, I just want to say that I'm very grateful to all of you for putting in so much time and effort into this. This can't be done by just the elected officials or just the politicians. The founders of our country were always worried that democracy would not work unless the people were involved and the people were educated about the issues. And don't underestimate how powerful you are and how important you are to help save our country, because we're in a lot of trouble right now. 60% of Americans do not graduate from college. A lot of people do not pay attention to the issues. A lot of people are politically disengaged and politically disenchanted. They've had it with the whole thing. And you are some of the best and the brightest. And the fact that you're putting the time and effort like this is really important, but we need you to do more. So I'll keep on doing my part, and I need you to keep doing your part and keep on working together, and we'll actually make things better. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, we're getting down to the end here. So Congressman Suozzi is his opponent is Michael LiPetri. And Michael LiPetri, this is his first run for congressman, was an assemblyman. And we're going to tee that up next, right, Harrison?
Yes, that's our next tape interview.
Okay, so let's see what Congressman Suozzi's opponent has to say.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. We're super glad to be joined by Mike LiPetri. And we're going to start tonight. Before we get to the questions, Mr. LiPetri, we're going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, the district that you're running in. We have folks that are joining us from all over the island. So if you could just describe some communities in the district, the party lines you're running on, and then we'll jump into the questions.
My name is Mike LiPetri. I'm an attorney, former New York State Assemblyman. I'm the Republican nominee for Congress in New York 3. Also a former canvasser for Citizens Campaign for the Environment. So very excited to be here. Thank you all for hosting today. I'm looking to represent the areas of the town of Oyster Bay, the town of North Hempstead, Levittown, the city of Glen Cove, northeastern portion of Queens, northwestern portion of Huntington, which includes Lloyd Harbor, Cold Spring Harbor, Huntington Bay, Haleside, Huntington Station, and Huntington Village. Looking forward to a great conversation. Thank you all for having me today.
Thank you so much. Okay, you ready for these questions on climate change? As you know, climate change is a very important issue for your district. And we want to know, what do you see as the most important climate or energy issue for the 3rd Congressional Districts? And what actions will you take to address climate change and make sure it's a top priority if you are elected to Congress?
Well, over the next 15, 20 years, we have to ensure that all New Yorkers have access to consistent, affordable, and dependable power, period. That means we're going to have electric facilities that run on gas for the time being. The cost of energy, as you know, is all going up, and the impact on families is going to be significant until the government is involved in ensuring that energy is affordable and predictable for the periods going forward for the next several years. Now, anyone that can tell you that we're going to have electric or wind or battery over the next 5 years immediately just doesn't understand the process. And the government needs to start talking to middle-class voters to understand fully the process and what's involved. So this is the real answer of what we need to do. We have to keep open gas plants. We need a localized generation and distribution right here on Long Island. Because as you know, as electricity, as the farther and farther away you are, the less and less energy you actually get disseminated to the source. So we have to convert from oil to natural gas. We still want natural gas stoves. I understand that there are those that don't. But in the reality of the situation, you still have to have that. We want energy diversity with fossil fuels. That means it's also recognizing that we do need wind, we do need solar, we do need battery alongside natural gas. So by having this expansive diversity of energy, it allows us to transition in a way that's pragmatic and logistical. The people need this predictable energy cost. They need the diversified energy costs. And over time, for example, you will see the cost of certain energy, specifically renewables, cheapen. For example, you saw it with solar. I remember when I was canvassing for Citizens Campaign for the Environment over a decade and a half ago, and we were petitioning for solar, and now solar has declined by 70% in affordability over time, which is fantastic. That's what we want to see, and that's where government's going to now work with the localities to actually speak to the people of how this will be transitioned pragmatically.
Okay, thank you. Next question. South Fork Wind Farm. And coincidentally, Melissa and Harrison and I went out on a boat with a bunch of other people, some elected officials as well, to view the South Fork Wind Farm. It's working great. It's producing actually more electricity than originally anticipated, and it's supplying clean, safe energy for 70,000 homes here on Long Island. It came online in December. 2 other wind farms are now planned for New York, and NYSERDA will be choosing more by the end of the year. If you are elected, what will you do to help New York transition to these renewables and ensure there is a well-trained workforce to meet the industry's needs?
So let's be clear. South Fork Wind specifically, that was successful because the government worked with the people in the neighborhood. That's how this came online. And the government must make sure that the regulatory system is feasible, remove the regulatory barriers, specifically the timeline for deployment. But most importantly, you have to work with the communities that are impacted. So as a congressman, what I will be doing is working with the communities to make sure that they're not financially or physically adversely affected, so this can come online in a seamless way. And we also want to have it where the federal government must incentivize and invest specifically in the technical side, the technical skills, the technical education in the deployment sectors of renewable energies to develop these skills and trainings for the public. By incentivizing with localities and the state, that can help us roll this out in a streamlined fashion where both the localities are on top of it, and also we have the workforce to deploy and implement the energy sources.
Thank you. Next question. As I'm sure you're aware, last month, Hurricane Helene brought widespread flooding and devastation to the American Southeast. And actually the month before that, in August, we had a major rainstorm that dumped over 10 inches of rain along the North Shore of Long Island in just one night, causing flash flooding, mudslides, the draining of Mill Pond and Stony Brook, and the destruction of Blydenburg Park. As climate change leads to stronger storms, we would like to know what you will do if elected to Congress to ensure Long Island has infrastructure resilient enough to withstand these impacts.
So the building of resilient homes using new technology, such as, for example, 3D model printing to create these storm resilient homes and structures is going to be an absolute necessity to create long-term sustainability in our communities. The hardening of critical public infrastructure is an absolute necessity. Congress specifically can provide these incentives to the state to, for example, upgrade building codes to make sure that we're promoting hardening of the critical public infrastructure, as well as these disaster resilient homes. So working in tandem to provide the carrot to the localities, we will ultimately see this change occur within our communities directly. And we need that first and foremost, because what's happening over time, we have to start now in order to protect against the future.
Thank you. As many of us know, climate change is not a political issue, it's a human issue. And it doesn't care who you vote for, and it certainly doesn't care who's in the White House. The 2 presidential candidates have very divergent opinions on climate and renewable energy. No matter who wins in November, how would you work with the new administration to advance climate policy?
Here's the facts. As a state assemblyman, I worked with both sides of the aisle to push forward legislation that advances the interests of my district. And I'm going to be doing it again. When I first campaigned, I said extremism on either side cannot be tolerated. There's a reason why I pushed forward bans on 1,4-dioxane or PFOA and PFOS. I was the chair of the Republican statewide water quality task force to focus on proactive solutions in preserving and protecting our water quality and upgrading our drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. And now on the federal level, as a congressman, I'm going to be still doing it again. Plain and simple, if it helps the people of the 3rd Congressional District, I'm in. If it hurts the people of the 3rd Congressional District, I'm out. I'm asking to go to Washington because I'm wanting to develop solutions and to get things done. I don't want to just be a congressman. I want to be our congressman for the people. And my interest is with us. I was born and raised here. This is my home. These are my family. These are my neighbors. These are my friends. And that's why I'm running, to make sure we all have a voice. I don't come from a political family. I'm here to get things done. And we have to have a reasonable, common sense voice for the future. Let's be clear. Climate change over time has now been distorted, politicized, or misused. And let's call it what it is, right? The weather is changing, and that's the facts. So we need to take reasonable steps to protect the people, our economy, and the future of the United States. So we need to do this together, and we won't do it if we keep having this partisan BS that splits it, where this is a Democrat issue, a Republican issue. It's a people issue. It's an American issue. And for example, I want to roll out legislation that's going to be real and pragmatic. You know, unfortunately, you have where the politicization of it has allowed bills to be pushed forward or laws to be pushed forward that just aren't pragmatic. For example, with the CLCPA, I said that that's a great example of how not to do this. It looks great on paper, but it's unworkable in the real life. And we have to do what's going to be actually real, what's going to be actually pragmatic, and what I want to see rolled out to make sure we have sustainable economy, sustainable future, sustainable energy sources for America, not just in the next 5 years, 10 years, but the next 30 years, 40 years. I think that's why it's so crucial that we elect the next generation to step forward, because I have skin in the game. And for me, it's going to be about my children, my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and where's America going to be, not just in 2024, but in 2064. So that's what I'm setting up, and that's how I'm thinking. So I want to thank each and every one of you for having me today. I look forward to asking for each and every one of your votes, because I look forward to being a voice of common sense, of reasonability, and to do what's right, not what's easy. Thank you so much.
Well, we have one last question, speed question for you, just for clarity for our viewers. Yes or no, will you support the deployment of more offshore wind that would come to New York?
Yes, as long as we work with their localities, yes. But we just, as long as we work with our localities, yeah, absolutely. As long as we work with our localities to make sure everything's rolled out in a seamless way that addresses the issues, yes, 100%.
Okay. Harrison?
Thank you, Mr. LiPetri. And before we say goodbye, we just want to provide you an opportunity. We have some minutes here at the end. If you want to add anything else you didn't get to mention or elaborate on anything for our viewers.
People could see more about me online at LiPetri4Congress.com. But you can also follow me on social media at Mike LiPetri for all the issues of where I am. If you're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're an independent, I don't care. I'm going to be your representative. If you vote for me, great. If you don't vote for me and I'm your representative, then still great, because I'm going to still be talking to you and still working with you to find common sense solutions, to find compromises, to work together. That's what this is about. And it's making sure we have people that are unafraid to have those hard discussions, those dialogues that are needed to roll out solutions that are going to be best of benefit for our future. So I just want to say thank you all so much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you joining us tonight. We hope you have a great day.
Thank
Thank you.
All right, so that was Mike LiPetri, who's challenging Congressman Suozzi in the 3rd District. And now we have our final interview of the night, came so soon, Representative Andrew Garbarino, who's the incumbent Republican in the 2nd District, and Rob Lubin, who was our first interview, is challenging him next month. We're so excited to have Congressman Andrew Garbarino here speaking with us today. So Congressman, if you could just briefly introduce yourself, where you're running, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all for having me. Congressman Andrew Garbarino here, running for my 3rd term in the United States Congress, representing New York 2nd Congressional District. District currently runs along the south shore of Long Island from Massapequa to East Moriches. But due to redistricting, I'm losing Moriches and Manorville and getting more of Massapequa. So it's going to be from Massapequa to Massac. Again, the whole South Shore, including Fire Island, all of the town of Babylon, all of Islip, and a good chunk of Brookhaven south of the expressway.
Awesome. And I'm going to hand it over to Dan for the first question.
Dan, you're
Take
muted.
myself off mute. Thanks for meeting with us today. And Dan from Citizens Climate Lobby, and we'll just got a question for you. So what do you see as the most important climate or energy issue for the 2nd Congressional District? What actions to address climate change will be a top priority for you if you're reelected to Congress?
Well, I think what's really important to the people of 2nd Congressional District, as well as people from every congressional district, is access to clean and affordable energy. That's not an easy thing to do, but it's something that we're working on right now in Congress. I'm co-chair of the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, 66 members, 33 Republicans, 33 Democrats, and something that we've been working on currently, and hopefully we can actually get it done before the end of this Congress. But if not, what we're going to work on next year and continue to work on is in order to get clean and reliable energy to our constituents, we need to do permit reform as well as transmission, expand our transmission of this energy. Right now, I'm hearing from solar companies, I'm hearing from wind companies, I'm hearing from hydrogen, I'm hearing from every renewable energy source, every energy industry in the country that they have all these projects ready to go. They have investors lined up ready to go, but they don't, because permits take so long, it's actually stopping these projects from getting online. So making sure that we can get the permits out, making sure that our transmission across the country is able to happen. You can produce energy one place and you got to get it to the place that needs it. So making sure that is handled is something that we're working on. Hopefully we can get it done at the end of the year in the omnibus or in a bill that has to pass by the end of December. But if not, it's something that my colleagues, both Republican and Democrats, are working on, and would love to see it done right away, because that's the only way to get these projects up and running.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Appreciate it. Well, we are very excited because the South Fork Wind Farm, first in New York State, has come online. It's up and running. It's actually producing more electricity than originally anticipated. Yeah. There are 2 others, as you know, in development right now for New York State, and more will come online or more will come on the list by the end of the year. So if reelected, what will you do to support these projects and help New York in its transition to renewable energy?
Great question. Yeah, I'm very excited that one project that's up and running is producing more energy than we thought, and it was during the slow season too. So if it's producing more energy in the slow season, I can't wait to see what it's going to do in the busy season. So that's very exciting. And I know there's another project. I've met with the CEOs of these companies. I've met with the U.S. CEOs. I'm in close contact. My office is in close contact with the federal teams to do what they need help with to get these projects up and running. This year, I know Sunrise Wind Project, we sent a letter in support to get this up and moving, as well as, we also, because it's not just about getting the projects up and running, it's about getting the workforce needed to keep them up and running, because there's a lot of maintenance that happens. So one thing I was very proud of, I partnered with Suffolk County last year and got them a couple $1 million to set up a workforce training site in Brentwood. That's currently in the works. We got them, I think, about $4.5 million to set this up, to make sure the workers are trained here on Long Island. They're Long Island workers, and that they can continue to keep these projects, not just get them up and running, but keep them running. So I'm very excited about that. That is a partnership that I've had with unions. That's a partnership I've had with the county, and it's something that I'm going to continue to work on to make sure that it happens. But I'm very excited about the clean energy that's coming from these wind farms. And just the work that the wind farms have done with the communities to make sure that there is community buy-in. That's always great when everybody's working together. So I'm excited to continue to support these projects and very excited about what else is going to come in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Last month, Hurricane Helene brought widespread flooding and devastation to the southeast. And actually in August, a storm dumped nearly 10 inches of rain on Long Island in one night, causing flash flooding, mudslides, road damage, the draining of Mill Pond and Stony Brook, and the destruction of Blydenburg Park. As climate change leads to stronger storms, what will you do to ensure Long Island has infrastructure resilient enough to withstand these impacts?
Well, yeah, those storms were devastating. They continue to be devastating. I mean, I go back to when we had Superstorm Sandy and how devastating that was on the South Shore. That was my first election back in 2012 to the state assembly. And I remember South Oakdale was, West Islip areas were still underwater 2 weeks after. So that was something that really, being my first election, it really it showed what we needed to do, which was invest in infrastructure. My first terms in Congress, infrastructure was a main focus. It has continued to be a main focus. That's why I supported the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which helped bring millions and millions of dollars for coastal resiliency projects, millions of dollars to coastal resiliency projects on Long Island. Additionally, through the community project fund request, which was earmarks, the old earmarks, but now they call it community project funds. I have worked with municipalities in my district, including Bellport, Amityville, Oyster Bay, Township of Oyster Bay, Lindenhurst, to Babylon, to get money to help build up coastal resiliency. These are whether it's drainage projects, whether it's road raising, there's a lot that has not been done even since Sandy. So that has been very important to me, and I've worked with local partners to make sure that the projects that they know need to get done, they have the money to get those done, because a lot of the bureaucrats in DC, they don't know the difference between Babylon and Bellport, so or Massapequa and Massapequa. So we need the locals with their buy-in, and I'm happy to partner with them. And lastly, I've worked very closely with the Army Corps of Engineers to make sure that they move quickly on projects, that they know what projects are done or need to get done. We worked very closely on making sure Fire Island got the money and it needed to rebuild the dunes after some of the storms that we had. And we've even changed language. We got an amendment this year in the water bill that actually says you can take, because I remember, if anybody remembers the fight over the summer, that the damage from one storm wasn't enough to trigger Army Corps help, but several storms in a row, it did. So we actually are changing language in the law that says you can use multiple storms in a row that happen in a row to trigger Army Corps help. You don't have to just rely on one storm, which was a big win for Long Island, a big win for Fire Island. So that was something that I was very excited to get done. And from now on, it will help us make sure the South Shore is continued to be protected and has federal dollars coming when needed.
Thank you, Congressman.
Hi, Congressman. As you know, climate change is not a political issue. This is a human issue, and it doesn't care who you vote for or who's in the White House. And clearly, we have two presidential candidates that have divergent opinions on climate change and renewable energy. So no matter who wins in November, how would you work with the new administration to advance climate policies?
Well, I think, as co-chair of the Climate Solution Caucus, which is, again, like I said, 33 Republicans, 33 Democrats, hopefully grows next year. Whatever solutions come, whether it's on renewable energy or to address climate change, it has to be done in a bipartisan way, because companies, municipalities, people, just regular constituents rely on what the government is telling them to do when it comes to renewable energy, when it comes to energy transition, when it comes to climate change. So it can't change every 2 years. When the House flips or the Senate flips, they can't just keep changing. Companies need to plan out 20, 30, 40 years ahead of schedule to get these big projects going. So they need to be able to rely on what they're being told out of Washington, D.C. So whoever wins, whoever controls the House, whoever controls the Senate, whoever controls the White House, we need to figure this out on a bipartisan level so it has long lasting so it can last for a very long time and people can actually rely on it and move ahead with the billions of dollars of investment that they need to do to get us to where we want to be. So yeah, I will work with them. I will work with whoever I need to make sure it get it done. And as chair of the bipartisan caucus, I've been to the last 3 COPs, in Glasgow, Sharm el-Sheikh, and Dubai. I just returned on a bipartisan trip to the G20 climate conference from the G20 climate conference in Brazil to discuss what we're doing here in the U.S., what we're doing with our international partners. It's something that people are relying on the U.S. for leadership. Other countries want the U.S. to lead. We need to lead, and it has to be done in a bipartisan way. If it's not done in a bipartisan way, it's always going to be the number one thing that people look to get rid of or change when a new administration comes in, when a new speaker comes in, when a new Senate Majority Leader comes in. Just look at the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was done in a bipartisan way, and nobody's talking about repealing it. But then you have the IRA right now, which was President Biden's one of his biggest accomplishments, he says, and because it was done with only one side, Republicans are looking to go after it. That's why, but there are some good things in the IRA. I voted against it, but there are some good things, like some of these tax credits have shown that they are really focusing on investment in the U.S. They're creating a lot of jobs, a lot of good paying jobs, and it's the innovation that has come from these tax credits is amazing. So that's why myself and 17 other Republican members of Congress signed a letter saying, hey, I know people are talking about repealing the IRA completely. Let's take a look at some of these tax credits first and see what's happened before we decide to do that. I was happy to do it. I was happy to do it before the election to make sure that people know, look, yeah, there are bad parts of the IRA, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Let's keep things moving forward. Let's keep energy transition going. Let's keep investment in clean energy going. We need to reduce our carbon emissions, and we need to do it in a bipartisan way so companies, whoever they are, can rely on what's coming out of Washington, and they can make those plans so we can all have a clean future. But yeah, I was very excited to work on all these projects already, and I'm excited to continue to work on them next year in Congress.
Thank you, Congressman. We appreciate your answers to our questions, and we do have an extra minute here at the end. You want to leave us with any closing remarks or anything you didn't get the chance to discuss in your responses? Well,
yeah, when I first got to Congress, I did not expect to be working on these issues as much as I am. I knew it was something that we had to deal with, but seeing how a lot of members in Congress were not focused on this when they were looking for a Republican co-chair of the Climate Solutions Caucus, having grown up on Long Island, having gone to the beach, having witnessed what happens with hurricanes and superstorms on Long Island, I knew that this was something that we had to address, something we had to work on. Our energy needs, our clean energy needs, it's got to be an all of the above approach, in my opinion, because one thing can't solve the problem for us. We need to look at everything, and we need to do it clean. We need to do it well. We have our energy consumption needs with data centers and these chip factories coming online are going to grow by 12% annually, they think, over the next 10 years. We need to be able to produce energies because nobody's gonna want a blackout or a brownout. So we need an all of the above energy approach. And I think solar, wind are definitely part of those, is part of the discussion and needs to continue to be part of the discussion and the solution. So I'm going to do whatever I can in Congress to make sure that we continue to move towards the right direction and be leaders, not just for the U.S., but for the entire world.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And let's hope all those congressional reps in places like Florida and North Carolina and Louisiana join your bipartisan caucus to tackle climate change.
We already have a couple, but we need more. So it's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay. That was a lot, I know. So that concludes, some of you were asking questions in the chat. We tried to answer as many as possible. Some of the questions were about Proposition 2 on the ballot, but that's good too. We like those questions as well. Harrison, want to say goodbye?
Absolutely. I just want to thank everybody so much for joining us. Just a few closing remarks. Election day is Tuesday, November 5th, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at your normal polling place. If you want to vote early, that's Saturday, October 26th to Sunday, I believe it'd be November 3rd. Locations and times vary by county, so check your county board of elections. October 26th is the deadline to both register to vote as well as request an absentee ballot. In New York State, you could request an absentee ballot without an excuse. So there's no reason not to vote. Please make sure you go and vote. It's not just congressional representatives that you're voting for. Obviously, we have a presidential election this year. We have a Senate election in New York State, and we also have state races, state Senate, state assembly. And depending on where you are, there are some local special races as well. So there's a lot to look at on the front of your ballot. And on the back of your ballot, as Adrian mentioned, we have Proposition 2, which is a clean water ballot referendum for Suffolk County. And then there's also other propositions at the state level as well. So please make sure you make a plan to vote. We thank you so much for joining us tonight, and hopefully that this gave you some more information about how you're going to cast your ballot, either later this month or next. Melissa, you want to add anything?
I did. I really want to thank you all for coming, but I also want to thank the candidates. This is a volunteer, and they came and they sat down and they answered our questions. And we hope that this helps you make a decision on November 5th. And the last thing I want to say is vote, vote, vote. That's it. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you soon.